This tool is working exceptionally well, so that's a good
Awesome.
thing. Yeah, we probably should have used this to do our previous one because this will synchronize the audio video no problem, and also the option of having side-to-side paddles is in place, so that's a good thing.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
yeah. How was your day today?
It was busy, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of what it always usually is, busy and kind of running by the seat of my pants, but it turned out okay.
How you feeling right now?
A little tired, but I can hang for a while.
When do you have to go to bed?
I don't work till noon tomorrow, so I've got lots of time.
Okay. So my thought is we're going to go for an hour.
Yeah.
Is on a scale of 1 to 10, how drowsy would you say that you are right now?
It's with 10 being the most drowsy,
Yeah.
I'd say I'm probably about a five,
Okay.
4 or 5, so I'm good to go.
Okay. Do you ever take stimulants?
No, not really, but I do have some vitamins and things like that I can take.
If there's anything that you can do that is not going to affect you adversely, and you can still get to sleep when you need to, I mean,
Okay.
it's entirely up to you. But
Yeah.
let me put it to you this way: the energy state that you're in generally today
Hmm.
is you got a paradox going. One is it's actually the perfect time for you and I to be doing this.
Awesome.
So, like the gears and everything else that's, perfect for this is in place.
Right.
You've also got an influence that might make things a little bit dreamy and intuitive like we talked about.
Yeah.
But if you're drowsy, then there might be things in the moment that you might miss that you might have preferred to talk about or ask if you
Okay.
had a little bit of extra clarity. However
Okay.
you want, however you want to proceed is okay with me.
Okay.
But if you want to take a few minutes and just
Yeah.
grab something that might give you a little bit of a lift, that's okay too. Whatever you want to do.
Okay, sure. Give me 2 minutes and
Yeah.
I've got the perfect thing. I'll be right back.
Okay. This is Donald Adams of the Sound of Stars online frequency groups, often known as Doc Stars by members. The purpose of this video is to describe a novel service to members, and our member Dami has requested this session, and he's also volunteered to allow us to video record this so that other members that want to get an idea as to how this works, will be able to. One of the things that's been happening the last while is I've been getting approached uh, on an informal basis, usually to provide a certain kind of service to members. And it is not something that I promoted, and I haven't really talked about it much publicly. I have a private list of people that come, and it's usually all word of mouth. I began to realize that the word of mouth requests for this kind of service is growing to the point where I feel like I'm entering one of those places where I keep having to repeat the same thing over and over again. So in this video, we're going to have Dami as our volunteer guinea pig. We're going to be strapping him onto the rocket and shooting him onto space, and he's agreed to that. And I'll also be describing aspects of what this is about. So um, most people that are familiar with my work, and I'm just going to mention, we're going to be referring to a number of terms, ideas, concepts, phrases, frameworks in this video, not all of which I'm going to be detailing. And if you want to get more details in some of the buzzwords or phrases that are used, you can avail yourself of our existing library of videos and find out more about that. But basically, here's the idea. Um, when a person is born, in most cases, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of the conditioning that they experience in life, they have certain kinds of potentials or tendencies. And there's lots of different words, lots of different labels for this. Different schools of thought and disciplines describe aspects of these differently. I have my own unique model. And the reason that it's of interest to people probably is because product of the model that I've created has shown to have a very favorable positive effect long-term on users. Basically, what's happening is I've created frequency maps that affect states of, consciousness. They affect a person's physicality to a degree. They can be enabling, towards certain kinds of behaviors that a person desires, and they can also be helpful in turning the volume down on not so pleasant behaviors. So basically, what we have is a frequency-based tool that allows one to modify their own behavior in a very dramatic and demonstrable way. But part of the model that I've worked on is that we also have the ability not just to create a frequency as a filter that we can superimpose over our state to get the outcome that we want, but part of the model that I've developed also lets us analyze, scan, or profile a person's overall, state of being, mentally, emotionally, physically. Part of my model incorporates an astrological view, and I want to be really clear. Probably some of the people viewing this video will have a wide range of opinions on astrology. Some will be very dubious and doubtful about it. Some will, from a very conventional scientific vantage, diminish this. And people that are, say, of a religious type persuasion, whether it's Christian Orthodox or Muslim in some cases, or whatever it is, may have a unfavorable view of this. My approach is scientific. I do not take a classical astrological viewpoint, and what you're going to be finding is that our description will be using astrology as a metaphoric library. So what I want to impress upon the viewers is that if we talk about different planets at certain angles to each other, in the framework of my model, we're not just talking about an astrological, woohoo, fantastic, mythical idea. What we're actually talking about are the elements in a kind of periodic table of states of mind and emotion. So when we say Mars or Saturn or Jupiter, we don't really just necessarily mean some planet that's off doing something in the sky that may or may not be affecting us. What we're talking about is an impulse, a kind of actual charged, energetic packet that impacts us in a certain way and causes a certain kind of result or events or way of perceiving or feeling things. So here's the way it works. When you were born, there is an imprint made. You come out of the womb, there's kind of an electrostatic precipitant that causes a biasing charge right down to a cellular level. And if any of our viewers out there are familiar with Jyotish, which is the Hindu form of astrology, or if you're familiar with Ayurveda, you know that a lot of times, for instance, an Ayurvedic practitioner will have all kinds of really strange concoctions that are often comprised of things like pulverized, powderized gemstones. So they may take an emerald or a sapphire or a ruby and they grind it up, they powderize it, and put it into this formula. Part of what's going on in the idea of the Ayurvedic practitioner is he's using something called the law of correspondences. Now, the law of correspondences is a kind of an archaic medicinal and scientific view of reality, which was largely dismissed by conventional science, erroneously, because there actually is scientific proof, I'm not going to go into all the details here, that a law of correspondence exists. For those of you that want to get an idea, consider that the dimension of the moon is 10,800 kilometers, and if we take a look at the law of corresponding elements of silver, if you take a look at the fine angstrom measurement, you'll find that exact unit measure, but on a microscopic basis, embedded right there as the unit measure for silver itself. So there's plenty of things that we can look at here for proof of correspondence. The bottom line is that when you are born, there is motion of large, massive stellar bodies hurtling across space, and there are very real physical energy waveforms that are coming off them. They are reaching the planet, and they are creating a polarizing effect on your organic being, and one could argue on other aspects of your being, whether it's mental, emotional, and to some degree metaphysical. So what happens is when you come out of the womb, the pattern of the sky, you could say, is almost graphed in a complex form on the tissue of your being. And so what that means is that when you come out of the womb, right down to the deepest part of your personality, you will have tendencies of how to think of others, yourself, of your behavior, of your reactions, of your responses, of your sensitivities, of your strengths and challenges, that will be largely traceable to this pattern. And what's interesting about this pattern is that not all of the impulses affect you right away. So what that means is, as you're aging, when you get to about the age of like 5 or 7 or 12, the overall holistic effects of that imprinted map, not all of them are activated. And some of them may never become fully activated. Some may activate at a certain age. So when you're, say, 5 years old, there will be a limited part of your personality, like an iceberg, that is just poking above the surface. And then you'll notice, it's interesting, that as you get older, parts of you remain the same, and other parts, it's like they wake up. Certainly when you hit puberty, there's a part of your being and consciousness that's just suddenly awake. So a problem arises in that we have something called hard and soft aspects. A soft aspect could be viewed as something that is harmonious or concordant, has symmetry. A hard aspect could be viewed as something that is discordant or disharmonious, leading to entropy or energy loss. It creates tension. If you take something with a hard aspect and you hurl it with enough force and energy into another structure, it can cause a loss of symmetry or can create a state of asymmetry in whatever is being impacted. It causes destruction. So when you're born and as you're growing up and you're moving through your environment, these individual metaphors in your life of consciousness, all these little elements that are connected in the grid work that are actually hardwired into your body, are in constant interaction with your environment, and your environment is in a dramatic change of flux. So you have a locked map that's on your tissue, and that locked map is already affecting you energetically, and the map itself is in real time interacting with what's actually going on in the sky, because energy in the sky is coming down and it is interfacing with that map. And there's a third layer, and the third layer is this. We live on a sphere, the Earth, which has its own energy zones or patterns embedded or impressed upon it. So that means that with your map and with the interactions in the sky, as you move across the sphere, there will be a third interference pattern or interference zone coming off the sphere. So here you are, a being living in the moment with three kinds of impulses coming towards you. And the danger is this: we have both the potential hazard and danger, as well as potential benefits of a positive outcome. But the danger is that if you are vulnerable in some part of your being and you're at the wrong place physically at the wrong time and in a situation that you would tend to be vulnerable in, you're inviting catastrophe, or you risk a greater degree of entropy, or you have more resistance to move through. It would be like, when you have those dreams, and when the dream is really happy and everything's going your way, maybe you fly. Sometimes some people dream and they have flying dreams. It feels like they're swimming and they can go really fast and they can dive and go all over the place. But then in other times when you're in a dream and it's, say, scary or not so pleasant, it becomes heavy and thick like mud and it's really, really hard to move. This is actually the way that it works in the real world. And there's proof to this. How are you doing so far, Danny?
I'm doing well. I'm just listening. I'm tuned in.
Okay. And is it making sense so far?
Oh, yeah, perfectly.
Okay, cool. So, so one of the things that happens in reality is that time itself can actually go through variance on a local basis, and we have evidence for this through the work of Kozyrev. Kozyrev, the Russian scientist, described an apparatus that he used and proved that this was the case, that within a very, very tiny margin, in a local environment, there would be variation on an atomic clock in relation to emotional intensity and types of emotion. Dami and I had talked with David Streeter earlier, and he had asked me about what my stance on the relation between gravity and emotion was. Due to time constraints, didn't have a chance to get into the entirety of it. But the bottom line is that there are different kinds of gravity, and different kinds of emotions could be rated or graded in accordance with these different flavors of gravity. One could almost say that the planetary archetypal metaphors themselves could be construed as having conceptually their own kind of gravity association. So we might, for instance, say that Saturn has a very heavy, weighty gravity to it, whereas Mercury could be much lighter, much quicker, much more rapid. So here's another interesting thing that occurs. When you consider an archetype, and for those that don't know, an archetype is simply an idea of a kind of persona. So a persona that would occur in our conscious minds that is pretty much universal would be the hero, the villain, the brother, the sister, the father, the mother, the employer, the employee. And then you could even go into like a much finer degree of metaphor and archetype. You could say, your second cousin. We can put familial designations to it, but usually what it has to do with is an archetype performs some kind of a function about experiencing consciousness or in a kind of relational context and consciousness with yourself and another. And when we view ourselves usually in an average state of consciousness, not usually as a single individual. We usually view ourselves as a weavework or tapestry of personas that we see ourselves flowing through life in. If you were to come to the end of your workday, and at the end of your workday you're reviewing all the events, you'll have memories of how you interacted with your partner on the phone. You'll have memories of how you interacted with your clients or your employee or your employer. You'll have memories of how you interacted with your mom. And you might rate yourself. You might say, oh, I was a good brother in this moment, or I was a bad employee at this time, or I was a good partner here, or whatever it is. And inside your mind, you have a geometry of reference, and you're always zipping in an energetic lightning strike between these different kinds of spheres of being. So now what I want you to do is imagine this. Imagine that you have a soccer ball, and the soccer ball has a number of patches, white and black on it. And you know that the soccer ball is spherical. It's not a perfect sphere, but if I take that ball and I roll it across the ground, chances are likely it's going to go in a straight line. I want you to view the soccer ball as an overall representation of your whole self. And then what I want you to do is I want you to conceptualize every single patch on the soccer ball is a fragment of yourself. And these fragments could be like, one is the sun, you. Another one is you as a father to your own children. Another one is, memories of you as a child. Another one is the taxpayer. Another one is the guy that is the handyman. He's the one that's handy with tools and builds shit. You have all these different fragments of self. So here's what happens. With most people, they usually have around, I'd say probably about a 30% at least, sometimes up to 50% distorted patchwork on the soccer ball. There are deformations or bends or warps or distortions in parts of their psyche. And in some cases they're short-term, sometimes they're temporally based, they're limited in time. Everybody has a bad time in their life where they're depressed for a few months. But in other cases, they're long-term. If you ask the person, what are the most sensitive secrets about yourself, or what are the areas of your deepest wounds, or in what areas do you make the most mistakes in your life? What are the parts of you as a person that you're not so happy about, that you would like to change? What you would usually see is a reoccurring theme that spanned years of wrestling with a certain aspect of self. So now what I want you to do is I want you to imagine that you have a soccer ball where some of those patches are pushed in, and the soccer ball is partially deflated, so it's no longer a perfect sphere. It's a little bit lumpy, it's generally round, and some of the patchworks are pressed in quite a distance. If you take that ball now and you try to roll it in a straight line, what you'll see is the ball wobbles back and forth, and it isn't making a straight line, and it's difficult to work with. This is the state that most people find themselves in. And if you're ever in a situation where you want to try to, in a much more simple fashion, describe this, do nothing more than this. Take some coins out of your pocket. You could take 7 coins and make sure that they're all dimes. Lay them flat on the surface and put them all together symmetrically. And what you'll basically see is you'll have a kind of perfectly symmetrical Star of David with a singular coin in the middle. And that coin in the middle is your heart. It's your central self. That coin in the middle, which is your central self, connects to all the other aspects of self. And all of the coins in the periphery are the roles or personas that you play. They're not truly you, but they're a function of your inner self. But now imagine that you do this. Instead of using all dimes, imagine that in the center of this image, you place a quarter, and then you put a nickel and a penny and a dime and a loonie and a toonie as the peripheral coins around the center. This is how most people are. And you'll see that it no longer forms a symmetrical Star of David. Now it's kind of off kilter, and there's a greater amount of energy shoved into one part of the outer self, and it's all off balance. And usually when we run into stress in our lives, usually when we have the greatest failing, it's because we are not equally balancing our strengths and gifts, nor are we tending to the areas of vulnerability. So what we'll see is that a part of our life will flourish, usually at the expense of another, and this causes us pain. And when we get to the end of our lives, whatever we feel happy about, we'll see that it was well tended. And whenever we feel this great loss and sorrow or bitterness or, regret over are those areas that have not been properly cultivated. So what is there to do about this? Well, the first thing to do that's really quite important is we want to take a look at the natal chart. And the natal chart is basically that born image, the map that you were born with. The next thing that we want to do is we want to take a look at what's called the transit chart. The transit chart is basically what's happening in the sky now for you, let's say over the next 3, 6, 8 months, and what is the relation of that perspective to the map that you've got. And then the third thing that we want to do is we want to also take a look at where are you spending most of your time. What is the location of your existence, over the course of a year? Because when we take a look at those three things as lenses, and we take a look at your core self through that lens, we can come up with some absolutely phenomenal things. And when the findings are applied in a practical way, one actually begins to see absolutely amazing results that stagger on the miraculous. And you become witness to evidence right in front of your eyes. Separate from all of this, this is sort of my version of astrological profiling. There are other tools that can be used that provide a parallax view, which is a complementary view, which reveals way more information. There are a series of tools that I've developed that allow me to scan parts of a person's being on a mental, emotional, physical level. And it will often reveal very intimate, important details about areas of, energetic, potential vulnerabilities or strengths that will only either be hinted in the astrological profile and sometimes never revealed at all. And when these are combined, the person is extremely well equipped for the moment of time that they're in, as well as outwards. So when we took a look at our example of the soccer ball with the deformations, it's not balanced, it's slightly deflated. This is a representation of the average person's natal chart. So what we want to do is we want to have the person have a means to inflate that soccer ball and to get the warps out and get it into a smooth soccer ball and have it work properly. And we want the person to feel better and to be able to function better. So once we've identified the problem, then we take a look at what the solutions are. Most people know about me and my work based on the solutions of frequencies that I create that help people reach states that they prefer. And I've never really covered the analytic, or profile scanning basis of the work before until, essentially now publicly. And I want to point something out here too, and that is that understand that everything that exists can be represented as frequency. So if someone were to come to me and say, hey, I have this injury inside myself, it may be a mental, emotional, or physical injury, and you were to ask me, do I think my frequencies could help you? My answer, and I'm not a medical professional, so I don't medically treat or diagnose anything, my answer would be that likely, yes, it could, but in no situation would I ever suggest or recommend that my frequencies would be the only solution that you should rely on, because you should be living a healthy, holistic lifestyle in tandem with that. And on top of that, although we've had some very intense and dramatic results with frequency application that surprised even me, I would not ever say to anyone or suggest to anyone that any of my frequencies will cure a situation. So let me give you an example. If you have what's called an affliction in your natal chart, in other words, you have a very bad aspect. Maybe you were born where you had, say, Saturn squaring Mars. So with that in your experience, you might have had car accidents. You might have lost people that you loved. there may have been some horrible, maybe you lost a limb. If you were to ask me, well, look, can I create a frequency for you that will, purge you of this, or erase it, or make it go away, make you stop having Saturn square Mars experiences? Then my answer to that would be probably not. But then I would follow up and I would say, but here's what you will notice. What you will notice is this. When you go through, say, a Saturn square Mars or hard aspect event, and you're using the frequencies, you're going to find on average that exposure and proper use of the frequencies will, in many cases, possibly the majority of cases, will tend to blunt, sublimate, transform, or mute the experience. Let me just explain something here. When a planet is at a hard aspect, in other words, you have, say, Mars is at a 90-degree angle to Saturn, an energy wave comes off that. And if you're born at that time, that energy is embedded into your body. But that energy will not always be active or dominant through your life. This is where transits come in. So let's say that, Dammy, you as a baby, when you were born, you had all these beautiful transits that came out. You were like a beautiful vase that came out. But son of a bitch, right around, one part of the vase, there was this crack. And it wasn't always there, and it wasn't always huge, and you could sometimes put plaster in it, and it would be okay, and you could put water, no big deal. But every once in a while, that crack might get a little bit bigger, or you might notice it more, or maybe it was causing some problems. The crack itself is a form of energy. It is a kind of frequency. And through time, that frequency will go up in volume, and it will come down in volume. So a transit, separate from the natal chart, is what usually triggers the natal. So in the real sky, if right now, in the real sky, Mars was actually squaring Saturn, there's a very good chance that if it was relating to your natal pattern in a certain way, you'd feel it. You feel that way more than the average person, and it will become active. And when it becomes active, other good, positive ones will suddenly become, lessened. Their volume will be turned down. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have an energy wave that's coming in, and it's impacting you, and you as an organic being are actually, your mass is actually energy itself resonating at a certain vibrational level, even though you look solid and physical. Right. When you play the frequency that I create, so let's say that I create a frequency that is a proper, scientifically accurate representation of Saturn trine Mars. So Saturn trine Mars is the opposite of Saturn square Mars. Okay. So here's for those that don't know, we have interference patterns in science. An interference pattern is where you have one wave coming from one direction, and then it interacts and it connects with another wave. And how these waves merge, basically depend on what they hybridize. So we have what's called a constructive or a destructive interference pattern. Yeah, and you've seen that in your own work, I'm sure. And Dammy works with microelectronics, so this has got to be a consideration on a regular basis.
Definitely.
This particular phenomena is something that you can review in all kinds of different disciplines, including music. In music, if you want to get a handle on what is a constructive hybridized product of interfering musical tones, you might refer to, for instance, Tartini notes, or you could take a look at microtones, harmonics. What we basically have then is, if we have waves that complement each other, then they don't cancel each other out. What they do is they create an entirely brand new, third hybridized wave, which is complementary to both of them, which would basically mean, oh, that sounds nice. There are two tones interacting, and they create a third tone, and it all sounds really pleasant. Or they are functioning together. Or if we have waves that are completely opposite from each other, when they meet, they cancel. In other words, they're neutralized. So if in the realm of metaphor, an idea within the conscious filmscape of our mind, if we were to conceptualize the energy pattern, the energy interference pattern of, say, Mars square Saturn, and we were to superimpose that on Mars trine Saturn, we would have a form of erasure. So how does this affect the actual user? Well, the way that it would affect the user is, let's say you have Mars square Saturn, and you're out driving, and you're in a car accident. So it's happened. and then you come home and then you play Mars trine Saturn. What I'm suggesting to you is that the energetic impact of the transit that's hit you and is manifesting in your life will actually, in effect, be muted by you playing Saturn trine Mars. When you play that frequency, what I'm suggesting is that for most of the users that are actively engaged in this, it will be like them having the literal ability of being able to turn the volume down of the effects of the energy coming in. So, you know, and this is very important. This is very beneficial, and it's something that can actually be tested. And for those of you that this may be new to, you know, Dami already knows this. There are ways that you can test simply out whether or not these frequencies apply to you. So, Dami, here's what I would do in your case. What I would do, you know, to provide remediation for yourself is I would talk to you about everything that I see that's positive and challenging in your natal chart.
Okay.
And I would point out, you know, for the average person, you're going to have, say, 3 to 6 natal aspects that, you know, you would want to have some degree of correction over. And then I would also talk to you about your transit chart, and I would say, look, here are some, you know, areas that look problematic coming up in the year for you. And then what I would do is I would take a look at where are you living, you know, what kind of energies can you expect in the physical location that you're in, and if it was really supportive, then I would come back and say, okay, well, look, you're going to go through these things, but don't worry because this is going to be present in your background, and you're going to be supported in this area. If it looks like the area that you're in was hazardous or not supportive or was challenging and you're going through a difficult transit time, I would say, hey, Dami, you know, it might be a good idea. You're going to go through a bit of a rough time in this part of your life. It might be a really good idea for you, if you can, for you to say, you know, take a vacation to Fiji for 3 months. You know, this sort of thing. And I know that people that have actually done this kind of thing, it's the most amazing thing. I've had friends that were chronically ill and they would go to some place like Bali. And it was almost like all of the symptoms of whatever they were going through was all but vanished.
Doc, it's cutting out a little bit. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you okay. How do you hear me?
Yeah, it was just cracking up a little bit, so I wasn't sure if you were having the same issue on your side.
Okay. Should we continue or should we reconnect?
Maybe we should reconnect because it's kind of getting all choppy and
Okay.
and
Okay, I'm going to hang up.
yeah.
Hey, Dami.
Hey, there we go. It's better now.
Cool. So now we've covered basically kind of an introduction to the astrological side of things. I want to mention something just really, really quickly. What happens with archetypes is that they have a kind of axis of interaction, and I just want to describe really, really simply. Every time when you take a look at astrology where you have a persona or a kind of an element of character, let's take a look at Mars, for instance, you always have a complementary opposite charge. So an example would be, for instance, let's go with me for a sec. Here's a straw, and let's visualize that the straw is like an axis, and at the end of the axis is a sphere. So here we've got a sphere attached to it, and at the opposite end we'd have another sphere. And so here we would say that this is like Mars, and then on the opposite end we might say, you know, this is Venus. So we have the yin female, and then we have the yang male. And what I'm proposing is that in the average person, imagine that you have all kinds of these straws. You have at least 12 of them, you know, and you even have subsets that go down to, say, 7, and then you can also get into, you know, a finer degree of definition where you've got thousands of these. So now imagine that you've got a sphere, which is you, and inside that sphere are all these little axes that crisscross. So you could see it's almost like a porcupine with all these little needles that come off, and there's a center point. But it isn't just, you know, sideways like this. It's also all these different angles. So you have some axes that could, say, come out to that point of perspective, here, 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 here. So just imagine a sphere with all these needles inside of it, and on the end of each axis is a kind of archetype. And these archetypes also have charge levels or pressure levels. So what that means is if this is Mars and this is Venus, then at any point of the axis, we have a gradient blend of those two energies. So if I go to the middle of that straw, I have a perfect balance of Mars and Venus. But the closer I get to Mars, I have more Mars and a little bit of Venus. Or I can go down here and I have a lot of Venus and a little bit of Mars. But now imagine that any point that I draw on this straw, that point, wherever that it is on that gradient, will also have a three-dimensional configuration or pattern to every single axis point that's within that sphere. And this is a map of an energy wave. And this is a map of your psyche. And so we can manage this. We can massage this. So if you play a rectifying frequency, a frequency that is meant to help you overcome an adverse inner energy pattern, you know, if there's an area in your psyche, in your mind, in your heart that you have problems with, when you expose yourself to the complementary opposite of that frequency, you know, or a frequency that will allow you to fine-tune it, then you can manage it and reach a better state of wholeness. And the reason for that is that your entire body will begin to resonate towards how you want to really be, and it will begin to mute the areas that you don't want to see sustained. So, okay, so separate from all of that, you know, astrological profiling, there's another model there's another tool that I've created, and what this tool lets me do is it lets me enter in defining characteristics of you as a person. So as inputs, you know, we take things like, you know, your blood type, your height, your weight, you know, your birth information as well. So your age, your physical location, you know, whatever your legal name or your full name is. Basically what we're doing is we're describing you as an object in time-space. By describing that, I can take a look at a number of dimensions that I can convert into an analytic view of your trajectory at a certain point in time-space. To the degree, and this might sound outlandish, but to the degree that we can actually get insight about your inner terrain and your outer experience, either in the moment or next week. So if you had a meeting that you had scheduled 4 days from now at a very specific time with a certain person, and you wanted to have an idea as to how that's going to turn out, if you provided me with the input separate from the astrological profiling, just with my model alone, I can give you information that you'll find will be 80% accurate 80% of the time. So what happens a lot of times, you know, with individuals like Dami and other members is they'll come to me and they want to buy some frequencies because they've heard the frequencies do things and they help people feel better, which is totally sensible. But there's the question of, well, what do I pick? What am I going to use? What's the best fit for me right now? And you know, and I'm sure you run into this. You know, Dami has a brilliant practice in Regina. You know, Dami is a genius and a professional at working with brain modification. And I've seen, you know, different situations where, you know, health professionals from various disciplines want to come up with some way to test or determine, you know, what sort of approach will be best for a patient. And some people use, you know, kinesiology, where you have like muscle resistance testing. I think there's some legitimacy to that. And I know that in your service, you have some pretty interesting tools at your disposal that frankly strike me as being pretty unique, especially in how you've assembled and set everything up. And so that means when you've got a client come in, and what was the name of your service again?
It's called brainwave optimization, and basically it's using neurofeedback technology or electroencephalography to map brainwaves and convert those brainwaves into sound tones that then mirror the brain and provide the brain with the conduit to observe itself so that it can then use the process of neuroplasticity to correct any imbalances. So it's right along the lines of what you're talking about, but your stuff is just, you know, way, way more intense. And, you know, your models just are frankly mind-blowing, because what I do is just an aspect of that physiological mapping that you're talking about, where yours is kind of just taking the person and just dissecting them into energetics, which is just phenomenal. And that's why I'm here.
I think one of the things I find, you know, really really positive and actually critically essential is that what you're doing and what I'm doing, not only are they complementary,
Right.
but you know, they're two sides of the coin.
Right.
And if we only have one side of the coin, that really isn't sufficient. You know,
Right.
I really enjoyed the tour that you gave me of your shop and had a great appreciation of the approach because what you're really doing is you're using time-tested traditional tools that have also evolved to a state of sophistication as well
Right.
as new cutting-edge technology. And a lot of this is an application towards directly affecting the brain properly.
Right.
And from the aspect of my work, the approach has been the train of mind. And
Right.
and obviously, I mean, here you've got they're both. You can't just take mind without brain in a happy, healthy human being. And really you shouldn't just take brain without considering mind. And so
Exactly.
it's a beneficial complementary fit. Um,
Yeah, and that's what I found with my technology is that it's focusing on the organic brain, right? The organism, and the energetics that are coming off the organism. But that's one thing that I found that was lacking was actually the conscious aspect or the mind as you speak of I mean that aspect is way beyond what we can comprehend as organic. You know, it's energetic, it's consciousness. And science so far has not been able to understand or comprehend even what mind is. And that's basically what you've done. And I can definitely see the complementary aspect of this. It's just phenomenal. So thanks for putting that in.
you're welcome. And I think that as far as any kind of remediation or rectification goes, if both sides of the coin are addressed, then you or anyone that comes into your sites or those that we interact with, you're going to have a much better handle. Danny, what was the website that people can check some of the solutions that you offer out again?
Um, I have two websites. The first one, which I saw Donald Adams frequently, is called the Universal Ascension. So visit it. I guess I should spell it www.universal. So like the universe, Universal Ascension. So ASCENSION tools TOOLS.com. And that's kind of like the product selling website. And then I have a different site, which is where I sell the brainwave optimization service, and that's called www.mindbot.ca. So mind as in your consciousness, harmonics as in harmony, but with an NICS at the end. .com or .ca, sorry. So that's a Canadian website.
Cool. And I asked Dami to share that because Dami and I have been working on a few different things together, and like I said, I've had a chance to witness some of the solutions that he's got, many of which are very integral and complementary to what we do. So it is actually worth your while to check that out, especially insofar as delivery of the frequencies go. But just to get back to what we're talking about, when people come to me and they ask me, what do I think, they should be using from my list of already pre-made frequencies, it's very difficult for me to give an answer without taking a fairly in-depth look at what's going on for them. If they give me a very brief idea, like, oh, I'm feeling stress, or I have anxiety, or I have shitty luck, or whatever it is, then I can make very generic responses. But when this was first being developed, probably the biggest application was that a lot of people walk around with negative voice tracks inside their heads. And they wake up in the morning and they go through their day with some voice telling them how bad they are in some way.
Right.
And throughout time, sometimes that can be so heavy and so challenging to deal with. It feels like you've always got this critic. So one of the most basic direct applications was, can I create a frequency that can actually directly hunt that voice down, find the bastard, chop them up into a million pieces, and then flush them down the toilet?
Right.
The answer was yes. It can be done, and it can be done well. But then we want to go a step beyond that. If a person has very specific challenges that either they're aware of, or in many cases they're not aware of, and they want to get that addressed, then what I would do is I would sit down and I would look at those three things: the natal chart, transit chart, and then their location. And then I would also look at my model, and then I can see where their challenges are. And then I can come back with recommendations of pulling tracks that I've already made that address that particular issue in a generic way. Or what I can do is I can say, well, look, you've actually got a serious problem happening in your natal chart and or your transit chart, and it's going to cause you this amount of grief if you don't do something about it. If you want to use a frequency approach, then I can't think of it. We're going to have to custom make for you. And so what that means is I've got to take your personal data, and I have to, spend time in a design process, a testing process, a calibration process, and then have you actually try it out real time. And what that means is I take whatever the energy is that's affecting you, and I attempt to create a geometry, a geometric representation of what the solution would be. In other words, what kind of frequency is going to cause neutralization or transformation of the energy into something that's better that you can handle. Let me just mention something. I said before that hard aspects are like the bad things, and that trines or sextiles or soft aspects are the good things. That isn't always the case. It's generally the case. Sometimes a person can have a hard aspect, like a 90-degree, 180-degree, transit or natal aspect that causes them tension, but its outcome can be good. In the same way that you might take a rock and you put it in a volcano, and it goes under this enormous pressure. Well, from the perspective, it probably doesn't feel super comfortable having thousands and thousands of pounds per square inch applied to it with like heat and everything else. It's like, get me the hell out of here. But the end result after time is it turns into a diamond. So sometimes these hard aspects can have a very beneficial effect. So the trick then is, how do you as a person get through a tough time so that you get the best results, the best effects with the minimum amount of damage? So in that case, what I would do is I would point a person towards a concept called sublimation. And this is something that even classical astrologers will talk about. If you go through a batshit crazy time, or just like a really freakingly hard, challenging time, and it is exhausting you, it is driving you to the wall, and you feel like you're just going to drop, you've only got so many options. One is it takes you out. You drop. You cave, and you hope that you get back up on your feet at some point. Or you stand up to it, if you're able to, and we can't always, depending on where we're at in our lives. We stand up to it, and hopefully we recover, and we get better, and we've learned, and we've gotten stronger for it. It's the old saying, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But there's a third option that can be separate from the two, or sometimes it can be also just the standing up to it. This is sublimation. And this is where you go through a difficult time, but you are able to somehow, in an almost acrobatic way, get a different kind of perspective on it, get a certain kind of relation to it that is way different from, say, being a victim or whatever. And when you get this sort of transformation, the sublimation process, in a very real way, you've actually managed to escape the pain. The pain doesn't feel as bad anymore. And not only have you escaped the pain, but you're no longer disempowered. You're not paralyzed. You're disabled to the same degree. You're in this range of free motion where even though you are aware and you can sense that there's stress, you're able to use this curious position to get leverage so that you actually take a really bad situation and you turn it into something marvelous. And you come out, it's like if life gives you lemons, make lemonade, right? So then what is the specific direction and energetic momentum and materialization of the sublimation? Well, the sublimation very much can come in the form of a frequency, because if you're resonating your entire body with a sublimating frequency, what that means is, and I'm not talking woo-woo here, what that means is there will be sudden ideas, realizations, changes, shifts within you, where you are in a much more rapid, much more certain and confident way able to go, whoa, shift that around, and I'm over here now. So this is another thing that can be done. Now, I'm going to just, Danny, we've mentioned before that we're going to go through your natal and transit chart really quick here. And if any of the stuff that we talk about you want to have edited out, because the video is meant for your use and also public dissemination, whatever you go through in this video that you want to stay in, you have full license over this. And what I'll do is I will save the raw video footage so that you have all the material for your own use. And then if you decide, you'll need to let me know. You'll need to watch this video and then tell me from this minute to this minute you would like this spliced out.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay. So I'm looking at, first of all, your natal chart. This is the most important part. And like we talked a little bit briefly before about stuff going on for you. And I think I had mentioned what some of your really positive things were. And then I had mentioned to you that you also had some challenges. And so as far as your strengths go, there really isn't anything I would recommend for frequency development there. Because you're already, like we really only want to develop frequencies for areas that are problematic. Because our idea is that this will create balance for you. So if we look only at the aspects, you might want to, it's probably important for you to jot this down. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10 hard aspects in your chart. And you have a really active chart, like you have a lot of aspects. And I think we mentioned before that most of the aspects in your chart are really they're beautiful, they're brilliant, they're strong. You have a number of hard aspects to your moon. So we have moon square Mercury, and we have moon square Mars. We have moon square Saturn. We also have moon square Pluto. And this does constitute a significant problem because here, if we take a look at, you've got Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Pluto. This is a definite short circuit with your emotional state, and with female energy. And we also see potential here for discordance between the mind and emotions, and also a disconnect between your masculine energy and your female side. And so here's the thing: it's like in certain cases there's something wrong with this because of the reality that we live in. But there may be times in your life that you would stand to benefit a great deal from if you were to allow yourself to. You have a very deep inner sensitivity. It's quite finely tuned, and you do express and reveal and show some of it probably to those that are really to. But you also repress an enormous amount of it. And it's not that you repress it so much just in your relation to other people, but you repress it to yourself. And that is, it's not like you're trying to be like the pseudo false tough guy. Gee, little Jimmy, stop crying and buck up. Get the fuck off your ass and go do something. It isn't like that. It isn't like that. It's more like it's almost more like it's a very firm, sort of logical insistence that you must transform something. You cannot feel this sorrow. You cannot, feel this fine poem. You can't just enjoy the cherry blossoms floating in the wind. It must be served to function in a transformative way. And again, in some situations, this is critically important. It's a good thing. But the problem comes in where you miss a part of the sort of beautiful, experience of living. You miss being able to experience it directly yourself, allowing yourself to experience it, and you also miss out in the reaction of other people from you giving it. So when you're in a situation where this can be let go of, and you can just sort of give of that, that harmonious, beautiful, feminine side of you, not like like some over sappy, flaky, like homo type way. It's more like, no, you know what? You too, actually get to be, the exciting young, male magical boy, the poet that makes the girl smile bashfully. And then the two of you go off and you have a secret little giggle under the cherry blossom tree and you look into each other's eyes and then you feel really
Right.
alive. And then maybe you write some kind of amazing poem and it gets out there, oh my God, did Downey
Mm-hmm.
write this? Yeah, he did. So this is important. It's really quite necessary to do that. And what's odd about this is that there is you have some hard aspects to your Pluto, and this is coming through. This is coming through the Moon. It's also coming through Mercury, and it's coming through Mars, and also Saturn. And so um, there will, we all have our shadow side.
Right.
And so in your particular chart, part of your shadow side, the false self, it wants to get you involved with shady deals. It wants to get you involved with shady people. And it uses the bait of, hey, you want to be cool, don't you? You want to be like us. Let's go do let's go do something like, really fun and exciting, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a trick because what's actually going on is that whoever these people are, they're actually sad and they envy you mostly, and they just want to bring you into their realm so they can suck some of your energy away. And whenever that part of you that is the part that disallows your sensitive side, those people would have greater proximity to you. So when you're more at odds with your own feminine side, and that doesn't mean that you overdevelop the feminine and not the masculine. It's balance. You want to have
Mm-hmm.
both, right? But when you're repressing that sensitivity of yourself too much, too often, um, and if you notice if there's say discord with interaction with female others, this could be female relatives, female loved ones. It could be you could have masculine friends. They're in Regina. That could be really good people, but maybe they're a little bit soft in some way. Whenever there's discord happening there, be careful because then this is when accidents will
Mm-hmm.
happen. This is when the bad people show up. This is when someone wants to invite you out to drink, and then once they've got you there, they want to drink
Mm-hmm.
too much, and then they say, "Oh, let's go look at strippers." There's no harm in looking at strippers, or whatever the heck it is, right? Whatever the metaphor is. So the moon requires rectification, and we're seeing those four aspects there, and you also have really really lovely ones with the moon. I won't go into that. If we want to discuss the positives, because you have so much positive in the chart, we can do that at a later date. But right now, we just want to talk about the
Definitely.
challenges. So that's the female energy. Female energy needs correction, and now I'm going to take a look at. You have also afflictions with your Mercury, and you have three afflictions to your Mercury. One we said was the moon. The other one is with Saturn and also Pluto again. So um, in this case, the mind gets overstressed. The ability to communicate and travel becomes hazardous. So there's a catch-22 here in that the way that this could come out is there might be times when you may be afraid to say certain things, and you may actually have good reason to be afraid. So this is where your discernment's going to come in. That there could be times where maybe you could say something, maybe you should say something, but the repercussions would be too great. And if they are too great, then you should probably keep your silence for whatever time you think is correct. Um, there's also a real danger of being overtaxed mentally. So it's very intuitive on your part to the business that you're in, because you're actually in this brain
Mm-hmm.
regulation business. You're front and center, able to handle it. Um, there's also Mercury has another hard aspect with the ascendant, and so there could be some kind of a discordance between things like your own personal sense of yourself and your mind. There could be a conflict happening inside the mind about its own self-reflection. Um, Now, just take a look at the you have Saturn conjunction Pluto, Mars opposition Pluto, Saturn opposition Mars. These are three that I would pay as much attention to, probably maybe even more attention to than even the lunar hard
So you said
aspects.
Saturn conjunction Pluto,
You have Saturn conjunction Pluto,
Mars conjunction Saturn,
uh, Mars opposition Saturn,
opposition. Okay.
and we also have Mars opposition Pluto.
Mars.
So these are very, very challenging. Um, these are really challenging aspects. You have a lot of pressure. This is explosive. This is we talked about some of the past events that you've gone through as a child, some of which were intense and somewhat traumatic. Certainly, it's likely that this is coming from there. Very, very likely that it's coming from there. And this is, again, these are lifetime formations. So what I would suggest is you make a special note of the Saturn conjunction Pluto, Mars opposition Pluto, and Mars opposition Saturn, with a special focus on Mars opposition Saturn and a special focus on Mars opposition Pluto. Those two are, because Saturn conjunction Pluto this is very challenging, but a conjunction in and of itself is not considered a hard aspect. So it would be much easier to sublimate Saturn conjunction Pluto to a very positive expression. It's still going to be hard. You've still got, Saturn tends to be lost or hard discipline, and Pluto is intense transformation. So anytime you put those two paints from the palette together, it's heavy. But because it's not a hard aspect, it's conjunction, technically it would be easier to get something good from that. But when you've got Mars opposition Saturn, this is one of the worst aspects out there. And you've also got Mars opposition Pluto, which is very explosive. This is like a nuclear bomb going off. This is like yeah. So those two you should put at the top of your list. Those two need to be developed. And then I would say the third next important one, you should have Moon square Saturn addressed. Most classical astrologers find that Moon square Saturn and any time you've got any aspect going on between Moon and it's Moon opposition or even conjunct, Moon conjunct Saturn is usually pretty unpleasant. That should be the third priority. And any of the other squares or oppositions, here's what I'm going to suggest. When I do custom work, because of the degree of labor that it takes, and there's often quite a lot of testing and calibration involved. And here's the thing, that there might be times where I could design a single frequency for you, and it might work really well for the first 3 months, and then it might bottom out. Usually when I do custom work, you're going to find that the effect is fairly uniform over whatever span of time. But in some cases, what can happen, you can see either a muting or a weakening of effects, through a certain trough. So, for example, there could be other things going on in your life where after 3 months, after 6 months, whatever, it feels like you can barely feel it anymore. And if that's the case, then what I might have to do is I might have to go back and make an adjustment to that. It doesn't happen very often. When it does, it's currently it's at my expense, so hopefully that's not going to happen. But yeah, so but what I'm going to suggest to you is that you've got 10 hard aspects. Technically, we could go in there and we could make a frequency or a frequency set, and by set I mean 2 to 3, maybe 4 frequencies per aspect. But what I usually suggest to people is pick a few of them and get a couple of frequencies designed so that you're spending less use those tracks, get used to them, and see how they work for you. Because using a custom design frequency is often a notably different experience than just the generically cataloged ones. I mean, all of the success and all of the good reports and the profound effects that we've gotten today, the majority of those reports come from the catalog frequencies, the generic ones. But I know for a fact that when a custom frequency is designed, and I only do a small, because it takes so much time, I only do a small number of these for people that are on my own kind of personal list of contacts. I know from their reports that it's usually over the top, so it can be quite intense. Yeah, so what I would suggest is, however you want to proceed is fine. If you wanted to get frequencies done for every one of the 10 aspects, it's going to take me some time to do that. But if you could allow yourself to settle on just getting a couple of them done, you know, that could be maybe, I probably would suggest that you should probably get at least 3 of them done. And if not, then you should get 2 of those. But we're looking at your natal chart right now. So before we settle on you know, doing that, let's just go take a look at what's going on with your transits. And remember, anytime we have a transit that is identical to a natal aspect, that amplifies the natal aspect or triggers it. So, you have Saturn.
So what's I was just gonna ask you about the transit chart. What am I experiencing right now that would fit into these hard aspects that you just showed me?
You're ahead of the
Okay,
curve,
sorry.
Danny. No, don't be. That's great. Let's talk about that. Let me just, I'm going to copy your aspects here from this window. Just give me 1 second.
Can I go use the bathroom real quick and come back? Okay,
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Hey, sorry about that. My computer keeps on doing this thing where it drops the signal. I think it has something to do with my wireless card, so I need to restart and all that stuff.
No, it's
But
okay. Don't. I mean, there. Oh, it looks like you're. Oh, no, there you are. Yeah, listen. Don't
okay,
worry about it. I've got a bunch of systems set up here that I have different tasks that I run on it,
okay,
and the whole Skype, like this the last couple of months has been like a big increase or demand for me getting my ass on Skype and just recording things for people. So I didn't
yeah.
really have. I'm working kinks out as I go, and I'm trying to get to it. So don't worry about it. It's fine.
All right, cool,
Yeah.
cool.
So look, I'm taking a look at what's going on in your natal chart, and then what's going on in your transit.
Okay.
And you actually do happen to have you have Saturn conjunction Pluto in your natal chart,
Okay.
and yeah, and you have a transit of Saturn conjunction Pluto, and it began in December 2011, and it lasts until October of this year. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but let me just read out. There's a description here that they give, and I'll read it out to you here. So during this time, you may have fewer resources available for doing what you want, and you may have to focus the available resources on more restricted and concentrated objectives. The effects of this influence are several. First, structure in your life will change significantly, but not suddenly or without warning. The changes brought about during this time are inherent in what is being changed. If you look carefully, it is rather like an inevitable conclusion of a situation. During this period, some things will come to an end, or an old order of life will cease. On a metaphysical level, this influence means that factors are now being incorporated into the structure of your life that will later bring about evolution and growth. This process involves getting rid of old structures. What happens now will have great consequences in 14 years. On a material level, this influence often causes financial problems or other kinds of shortages. Sometimes government or other officials will impose heavy burdens that greatly restrict your freedom of movement. That's something to consider with the weird political stage that's being set right now.
Yeah.
It is also possible that some incident or accident may affect your health and thereby restrict your freedom of movement. All of these effects confine your energies so that later they can be focused upon matters that will require your full attention. If your energy is spread too thin, a later crisis will be much more difficult to bear. Then you will have to go through a most unpleasant house cleaning of everything in your life that interferes with your natural pattern of evolution. As you are more and more restricted by circumstances and the need to use your resources conservatively, do not simply hold in your energies. Build new structures to correct the problems you face now, which is probably why you're talking to me.
Right.
Build new structures.
Right.
And concentrate all your energy on bringing about necessary evolution in your life. Now, you also have a Saturn opposition Mercury, which began at the same time, and it lasts for the same time. And I'm just going to double check something here. Yeah, so you have Saturn opposition Mercury also in your natal chart. So you have two Saturn natal aspects that are being activated. They have been activated for a while, and here's how it works with the transit. Imagine that a transit is like an elastic band. And the elastic band is stretched and it's affixed to two different points. So if the points come together, the elastic band is not taut, but rather it droops and it drags.
Right.
And then you pull it back and forth, right? So the way it works with transits is that the peak of the effect can happen at 3 different places on average. So the impact of the transit will either occur within a very short period of time when it begins, or it will happen very close to when it ends, or it will happen in the middle. So, and it's usually one of those 3. It's not in between those areas usually, although you might feel it in a graduated sort of general background way. Mm-hmm. Usually it'll have a spike. So for your Saturn opposition Mercury and your Saturn conjunction Pluto, I don't know what your last year has been like overall, but if you have not experienced the spike of those energies yet, then it could be that they're going to be peaking towards the latter part of the cycle. I don't know. The information I just read you about Saturn conjunction Pluto you can get from Astrological. That was their interpretation.
From where?
Astrological, ASTRODIENST.com. Really recommend them. It's a good site. There's a lot of free stuff on there. If you just type in astro.com, ASTRO.com, and you can get a snapshot of your transits there. They don't give you all the transits. They give you some of them. And right now we're just looking at some of the more important key ones. So there are other tools that we would use to get a more in-depth view of this. But for right now, it works for us. Okay. I would suggest that you go to astro.com, you type your birth information in, and you should go to the section called Short Report Forecast under the free horoscope section. And in there, you will see a good selection of a number of the transits that are coming up for you, and you can read this directly. Now, now the Saturn conjunction Pluto sounds pretty heavy, and it is heavy, and you should be mindful of it. But you have a lot of really beautiful, good things going on too. Remember, what we're doing here is when we take a look at our transit chart, we're creating a painting, and the painting has lots of different hues and tones of color. We're not just painting all a black picture. Right. We're not just, okay. So a good thing here is let's focus on the things that are positive in the painting, because there are positive things there. Just be aware of challenging stuff.
Right.
So if I were you, let me just ask you, from this point in time now, going back to last December, do you feel in your memory you've had any kind of spike that matches the archetypal blend of a Saturn conjunction Pluto style event?
Oh yeah, talking about governments interfering, things like taxes, for instance, have been huge in terms of sapping resources that I worked hard for. Also, just just it always ties around finances. It seems like there's this noose around it, and even though it flows, you get like a pipe and you're pumping water through it. Let's say the pipe is flexible,
Yeah,
and you release it, and you get a spurt of water, and then all of a sudden it clamps down again, and then
yeah.
releases, and then it clamps down again. That's something that I've been experiencing. And when it releases, it's a huge flow of water, but when it clamps down, it's hard.
Oh,
It's
sure.
it's very hard as well. So and then just little gremlins here and there, like sapping the resources here and there. I'm like, whoa, 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 where are you guys coming from? That kind of deal, So that's something that I've been experiencing quite a bit of. Um, you talked about some of the stuff about the emotional state and making poetry and things like that. That's something that I've lost touch with over the last few months, or even year or so. Because I mean, that's definitely me. I used to tap into that aspect quite easily, but right now it's just my mind is so focused on the financial aspect that that aspect of myself has seemed to be lost. And I always have inklings to go back there, but this kind of is like validation that I really need to focus on that part of myself. Um, Another thing
And
that's
let me just mention something here.
sure,
Don't lose that train of thought that you're on.
sure,
Um, there's nothing wrong with that. I
right,
mean, you know, and I know that sometimes that has to be done.
right,
But what I would suggest, and I think you're already fully aware of this, is just to let it go entirely.
right.
And and as you can, as you see fit,
Hmm.
allow that to come back into whatever your personal space is at some point, and let it flourish again. That's
Definitely,
all. Yeah.
definitely, I agree with that. Um, but another thing that's really been troubling for me is memory, recall.
Yeah.
Um, and you had an aspect about that being that the mind gets stressed, communication becomes hazardous.
Yeah.
Well, found things that I've always seemed to have this issue with forgetfulness and just recall being difficult. But it's even way worse in these last few months, and I've been like, what's going on? I know I'm a intelligent person, but the memory aspect and the recall aspect has been so hard for me to grasp, and that's something that I've been struggling with. And then just being overtasked, just having lots of things to do, and it's like, whoa, what do I do? So some things get left on the wayside because it's like I can't handle this all. Those kinds of things also tend to happen. So yeah, I've been noticing a few of the things that you've mentioned there quite strongly over the last year or so.
I mean, there's an area of astrology, just medical astrology, and I think there's a lot of value there. There was a fellow named Everton, and he developed an entire school that was kind of devoted to what he called midpoints, and the thousands of cases that he cataloged and analyzed and studied was primarily or was largely geared towards getting an understanding about how these aspects uh, manifest in specific health areas, including, of course, would be mental performance.
Right.
And what I can tell you is based partially on Everton's Reinhold Everton, a really really good series of books that he wrote, but Everton would have said that your memory is probably being affected by the transit that you're in right now called Saturn opposition Mercury,
Hmm.
because Mercury governs memory, and Saturn is like a blockage or a resistance to that. So if now, let me ask you, when you began to notice a peak in the memory issue, uh, I mean, to the best of your knowledge, how many months ago did you become distinctly aware that there was some kind of a discrepancy in memory performance?
I'd have to say it's probably started um, toward the end of last year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's toward the end of last year was when it started becoming quite apparent, and this year it's just been like the last 2 or 3 months have just been like it's peaking. It's really really bad.
Okay. If that's the case, then you know, if and you say you noticed it at the end of last year, that
Yeah.
is, yeah, that is where we're seeing it in your chart because it shows that this transit began at the end of last December.
Right.
So you're bang on the money there. And if it is peaking right now, um, how good has your memory been within the last week or two
Um,
in comparison to a year ago?
it's not been too bad. It's not been too bad.
Is it
It,
leveling out?
yeah, it seems to be leveling out. I had that little stint in Sedona where I took some time off to do things that, I wanted to do specifically. And at that point, it seemed to have leveled out quite well.
Okay.
Today and yesterday were a little bit of a challenge, um, but not as bad as it has been, but still noticeable.
Well, what I'm going to guess here is that it lasts until the beginning of October. So I'm going to guess that you've probably already reached the peak of, as far as the memory gap goes in relation to that transit.
Hmm.
You're probably already past it, and you're on your way back up again, or
Okay.
you're close, or you're very close to having passed it. So
Right.
because I'd say probably by about early to mid August, it'll feel like your memory's coming back to you,
Okay.
like distinctively.
Right.
So I don't know if you, I don't know, I would not necessarily, I mean, unless you feel like spending lots of money, I would not necessarily strongly advise you to get a frequency for Saturn opposition Mercury,
Okay.
because I think if you just get adequate rest and you're taking things like ginkgo biloba and etc., you can probably handle that fine.
Okay.
Um, how has your communication been with? Hold on, let me just take a look at something here. Um, has there been any notable protracted breakdown in communication that was good, where it's like more consistent than is consistently comfortable? Has that happened?
Protracted breakdown in communication. I know with my business partner, we're not really communicating as business partners should. There have been breakdowns, but we're kind of two easygoing guys. So when the breakdown of communication happens, it kind of happens and then flows, and then it's like, okay, let's move on, that kind of deal. But I do know that I want to move on from that relationship, and he does too. But what's currently keeping us together is the business, right? And his investment in it. So, in that regard, there is a little bit of work that needs to be done there. Um, Also with family, I wouldn't say that it's bad, but it did get bad in like September, October last year, and that's finally starting to kind of clear out. And and family being like uncles, not my immediate family, like my sisters and my brother, but like family above and beyond that, and that's starting to clear out a little bit. So
Okay.
yeah,
Let me just give you some quick feedback on that.
sure,
I could be wrong on this, but I don't really see there being an overt need for frequency development on this issue.
right,
But what I would suggest to you is that I mean I don't think that you require the additional energetic momentum on this one.
hmm,
But what I'm seeing here is that you on your own, as you are right now, are quite capable and sufficient currently to sublimate this one. And here's how you do it.
okay,
This is the most likely, most probable solution to this. And you're going to notice, very likely, that as you do this, your memory will probably get better.
hmm,
It'll
okay,
be like this really weird, kind of like bizarre relationship where suddenly you're remembering things, and it'll be like, wow, that's freaky.
yeah,
Um, so, and I have a feeling that you're probably already doing this already, so that's a good thing. Maybe that's why you're noticing your memory leveling off.
okay,
But you want to avoid rigidity. in any kind of communication. You want to be mentally flexible as much as you can, and the other thing is, if other people show resistance to your thinking, in other words, if you suggest something, or you give an idea, or whatever it is, there you are, you're interacting, you're communicating something, and for whatever reason it feels like they're just putting up walls. What you don't want to do is feel like you should give up, and feel like you're not, and don't believe that you're insecure in your thinking and plans, but instead use their resistance to make your plans more defined and clearer.
Right.
So whenever resistance gets thrown up, imagine it almost as if it's not an individual that you're talking to. Imagine it as though it's the universe saying, "Give me more definition. Give me more definite steps to implement." And then your results are likely going to turn out to be extremely good if you apply hard work and you put a lot of heavy thinking into it. You have, it's showing very clearly that you have to put an awful lot of mental deliberation, a lot of heavy thinking, precision, thorough, step by step, and then your results can be like the way it shows up is like this beautiful, like a diamond, like the end result is a diamond.
Cool.
And let's see here. There may be relationships that become severed because of just outright disagreement. That may happen regardless of what you do. And if that does happen, there's nothing you can do. You just go, okay, and you let it go. But you're not to give up, and you should feel more confidence in your thinking and plans. But you should also put in probably far more extra effort than you might have imagined and take it slow, if you have to. You may go through, in relation to this, you may go through a little bit of self-doubt and questioning, and then you go off on a journey to find out, okay, well, what was wrong with that idea? And solve the situation, because you become kind of detached in this sort of like meditative way, and then you find out what's wrong. It's like, then you figure it out. Yeah. So that's your solution there.
Cool.
You do also have some really positive ones coming up now. You've got Uranus trine Uranus, which is huge, positive, and there's a Jupiter opposite Uranus, which can be challenging, but in this case, I think it's going to work out okay for you. So what I would suggest, probably, have you been in any accidents this last year?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, the Saturn conjunction Pluto, then I don't know. I mean, it only lasts till October, so unless it's going to peak out between now and October, I wouldn't advise that for the transit. The only thing I'm seeing in your transit chart right now that I'm concerned about, really, is Saturn conjunction Pluto, Saturn opposition Mercury, and maybe Jupiter opposition Uranus. So you need to have you need your luck improved. And you have Jupiter opposition Jupiter, overconfidence. There's a danger that at the end of July, it's like you start feeling really optimistic, and then you start to take on many projects, and they're all time consuming, and they all start to kind of come together at once. And there's a potential great deal of advantage there, but it can also be challenging, and you're going to feel restless. There's also, if you're careful and you use restraint, and again you stay grounded and balanced, then this is actually an extremely successful influence, financially as well.
And that's Jupiter opposition
Jupiter.
Jupiter, okay.
Yeah, and it goes from the end of July until April 2013.
Wow.
But it has to be managed right. So if you don't manage it right, then it's not going to turn out so well. So you need to curb the restlessness, and you need to be not too overconfident because you'll set yourself up for a fall then. And you need to balance, care, restraint. Do that, and you've got a golden ticket.
Okay. Awesome.
So what I'm going to suggest to you is the way that it usually works for me, if I do any kind of custom work, is I usually charge a minimum of $500 for a commission fee, and that's usually per subject. And what that usually results in is anywhere between 1 to 4 frequency drops. And in your case, if you still have a peak coming of Saturn conjunction Pluto, it might be beneficial to make a track for that since it's active right now.
Okay.
It might also be beneficial to do one for the Saturn Mercury one. But we don't know for sure if this is peaked out yet. I would say that separate from those two, you should put your priority on the ones that we mentioned before,
Right.
of Mars opposition Pluto, and also the Mars opposition Saturn. So the top priority would be Mars opposition Pluto and Mars opposition Saturn, and then Moon square Saturn. I would say that those are the three that you should prioritize and make your investment in, see how it works. And you know what you could do too is if you wanted to test things out and keep the budget manageable at first, you could go with one single development subject. And what you could do is you could make a sublimation or like a positive forming track for the Saturn conjunction Pluto since you're in it right now. Either the Saturn conjunction Pluto or the Mercury opposition Saturn. That way you're only looking at $500 and you're targeting something that's right now, and it is going to be active till October. And you know as well as I do that from this point forward, over the summer and the fall, we're expecting a lot of volatility,
Right.
all over the place.
Right.
So if you had something to give you some kind of energetic buffer to either of those two, and you had a chance to test it out, you're going to know.
Okay.
And if we did something for, say, either Saturn conjunction Pluto or for the Mercury opposition Saturn, you're going to notice it. If the custom design solution is one that is going to work well for you, and it's going to provide benefits that are equivalent or greater than what you're spending, and especially since these are such strong aspects,
Right.
then I would say that you minimize your risk by only making a small purchase and testing out like a singular subject.
Right.
And then you might go like after the first week, you might feel like oh my God, this is like craziness, and
Right.
you might so that's what I would suggest.
Right.
Do you have any questions about anything we've talked about?
Yeah. So you said the Mars opposition Pluto and the Saturn conjunct Pluto are the two that I should be looking at.
Well, these are the most, in my personal opinion, these are the most dangerous ones in your chart, in your natal chart.
Okay.
I mean, any of the other challenging ones, I mean, they're annoying and they're grievous and they can impact your quality of life.
Mhm.
But it's the well, you've got Mars opposition Saturn, Mars opposition Pluto, Saturn conjunction Pluto. Those are the most dangerous ones.
Okay.
And
Well, I want to take care of the most dangerous ones and the ones that are like you said, the ones that I need to buffer against, you know. Hello, my name is Dan McBammy, and I'm just giving this testimonial for Donald Adams, based on the consultation we did a couple of weeks ago regarding the Sound of Stars frequency rectification using astrological charts. I found this consultation to be highly helpful and highly beneficial in terms of seeing the issues that I had in my charts that were causing me problems in my psyche. I would call them imbalances. Donald Adams and other astrologers would probably call them detriments in the charts that have caused me to have certain behavior patterns. One of the patterns that I had very clearly when Donald Adams was explaining was my Saturn in my chart was not really cooperating with me, and I'm really excited to get this corrected and rectified, because I always knew that there was something going on there, but I wasn't very sure of what it was. And Donald Adams was able to clearly show, using his modality, the fact that these things existed. But he also not only just told me about them, but is actually going to be doing some rectification work for my chart, which I'm highly excited about and I'm really looking forward to. So thank you so much, Donald Adams, for the opportunity to consult with you, and I'm really looking forward to my rectification charts, which I will create a testimonial for you once I've tested those out. I'm looking forward to sharing this with my clients. I know a lot of them are very excited about this. I've told a few of them already, and looking forward to doing more work using the sound of stars specifically for my own health and well-being, not just in terms of the frequencies which you already have out, but in terms of building further frequency sets for myself as well as